So President Donald Trump has announced that he will designate some Mexican cartels as terrorist groups. This is big breaking news that's been building up for some time. That some Republican lawmakers have been pressuring for, and some other people have been warning against and saying it has perilous consequences. I will look at some of the implications of this, some of the ones that are expected more, others that have actually quite unintended consequences that could even hurt Trump's own base and that he may not have thought of. My name is Ioan Grillo. I'm a journalist and author in Mexico. I wrote the books El Narco and Gangster Warlords about drug cartels. So first of all, there is a debate about actually whether you can call Mexican cartels terrorist groups. And this gets into the idea of whether their violence against civilians constitutes terrorism, or whether terrorism needs to be something which has more political or ideological motives behind it. That's a long discussion we can have, but right now I want to talk about four consequences, two which are more obvious and which the supporters of this move have thought of, and perhaps two more which they haven't thought of, which could hurt some elements of Trump's ideas and his base. So the first one is that this plays into a larger narrative of President Donald Trump of defending the southern border against dangerous foreign threats. This will be used at rallies, this will be used in arguments to get funding to build walls. The idea, you're not just trying to stop gangs coming into the United States, but actually stopping terrorist organizations. Now the second one is to do with the potential military intervention or military actions by the United States against cartels. This is something that until recently anybody following this thought was a complete fantasy, something you only saw in movies like Sicario. But now it's actually something we have to seriously consider. After the massacre of the Lebaron family in Sonora, Mexico, President Donald Trump tweeted out that he was offering military support to Mexico. This is not something that the Mexican president almost certainly would ever allow. There's very strong nationalist feelings here. However, with the idea that they're terrorist groups, this could justify some kind of military intervention against a cartel close to the border. I do not think this is something which would help alleviate the violence in Mexico. I think it would only antagonize further the situation with dangerous consequences. However, there are two other things that could happen because of designating cartels as terrorist groups. One is the issue of guns. Now, anybody who's been following this knows that large amounts of firearms that the Mexican cartels have come from the United States. Between 2007 and 2018, there were more than 150,000 guns which were taken from Mexican criminals and traced to US gun shops or gun factories. If you don't believe me on that, look up the figures. They come from the US National Trade Center. These are the ATF official numbers. Now, right now, people in the supply chain on the US side who get those guns to the cartels do not generally get big sentences. Even those who are straw purchasers, which means people who go into the shops and buy guns for people affiliated to the cartels, normally only get suspended sentences. However, if this law was passed, they could then be charged with supplying materials to a foreign terrorist organization, and they could get 25 years. So that's a big change there, and this could affect some people on the fringes of the gun industry. Though some in the gun industry might say, well, they're glad that people who are involved in any illegal activity are given longer sentences, but many in the gun lobby are against any increase in sentences against people involved in these kind of gun crimes. The second thing is that there's many people who are refugees from Mexico applying for asylum in US courts after fleeing from cartels. It is very hard to win those cases. They're not fleeing a military dictatorship. They're not fleeing a traditional war. They're not from a persecuted religious minority. They're fleeing criminal warlords, sometimes who are working with corrupt police and soldiers. And it's hard to argue those cases. However, if they were fleeing from gunmen, if they suffered threats from gunmen, had members of their family killed by criminals of a group that was designated as foreign terrorists, that would really strengthen their case in courts. So paradoxically, you could actually see more refugees be able to come into the United States from Mexico as a result of this. Now, one of the things when this actually comes in, it will be hard to actually see how they name which cartels they name. And one challenge for the US government, and something which Donald Trump, I think, alluded to in his answer there when he brought this up, was the fact that cartels are often changing their names, so that you might designate one cartel the Zetas, but then suddenly you have a group called the Northeast Cartel, and then you have another group called the Zetas New Blood, and they're not officially members anymore. So that's one of the challenges there. The groups constantly change their names, and many people are just affiliated members. But we'll see who they name. I think it will be likely they name possibly the Zetas, the Gulf Cartel, the Sinaloa Cartel, the Jalisco New Generation Cartel. These are some of the candidates who could be named there. In terms of how the Mexican government will react, there is not a great deal they can do, and I can't see them kicking back really hard against this action.